Hi guys, I'm Daddy Freeze, convener of the Free the Sheeple movement and leader of the Free Nation in Christ. I greet you and I bring glad tidings. I'm here to dispel an age-old fallacy. This is something you probably have been with from as early as you can remember, and that's the fallacy that God created you. God didn't create you. Your parents created you. This might sound like I'm bursting your bubble or standing up against everything religion told you, but I'm here to correct age-old misconceptions. Let us start with visiting the book of Genesis, chapter 1 and verse 28. The scriptures tell us that God created Adam and God gave Adam dominion. He said, govern the earth. And God said, be fruitful and multiply. Why didn't God just make more people? Why did he tell Adam to be fruitful and multiply? You see, you don't realize it, but each time you hand your responsibility over to God, what you're doing is you're failing to take responsibility for your situations. I'll take this again. If you go to the book of Genesis, chapter 9, from verse 1, the same instruction God gave Adam, God gave that very same instruction to Noah. Said, Noah and his sons, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. After the flood, a lot of people say, hey, the flood was regional. Some scholars will argue, oh, the flood was global. I think it was regional, but that's not the argument here today. Whether it was regional or global, there was a flood, and Noah was in the epicenter of the flood. And God could have created more people. Instead, he made Noah reproduce. Same thing with the animals. God also made the animals reproduce. That's why I said 2 of a kind, 6 of a kind. Read the story for yourselves. Because when you hand over your responsibility to God, you do not take the responsibility of your situation. If Noah did not reproduce, a lot of people on earth today will not be here. You are a product of your parents. You were created by your parents. You needed 2 people to create you. And each of your parents needs 2 people to create them. So to create your parents, you need 4 people. 2 people to create your mother, 2 people to create your father. And your grandparents also need 8 people to create them, because you have 4 grandparents and each of them need 2 people to create them. And your great-grandparents need 16 people, and as the number increases and as your ancestors increase, the number of people needed to make them also increases. God created a perfect Adam and put him in a perfect garden, but for one reason or the other, Adam left the perfect garden and came into an imperfect world filled with natural disasters and hurricanes, and some places have drought, and some places have floods, and some places have different kinds of sicknesses associated with them. So for Adam and Eve's offsprings to survive the world, they had to adapt. I'd like you to read Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. That throws a lot of light on natural selection, on how evolution began. And those of you who say evolution doesn't exist, what do you say about mutation and natural selection? And why, according to Charles Darwin's, the birds on the Galapagos Islands are different because their beaks are longer and their claws are in a certain way from the birds who aren't on the Galapagos Islands. The same species of birds, but different adaptations. Adaptation leads to mutation, or mutation and adaptation go hand in hand, as the case may be. Sickle cell anemia is a very big example of this. Sickle cell anemia has been suggested to be a mutation to ward off malaria, because people with the AS genotype find it easier to survive malaria than people with AA. So the more AS survive malaria, the more the chances of AS to reproduce would increase. But then it comes with the downside of creating SS. What is natural selection? Green butterflies flying in a green forest would survive predators easier than blue butterflies flying in a green forest. Same thing. You heard the slogan, a green snake in green grass. It's hard to spot. So the green snake living in green grass will most likely be able to feed itself and therefore survive better than a brown snake in green grass. These mutations are what made you. Angelina Jolie had to remove both her mammary glands because she had the gene for cancer. So do you want to tell me that God created Angelina Jolie in all her beauty and put a defective gene in her? God didn't do that. Her many ancestors passing down genetic information from generation to generation is what led to what we have today in Angelina Jolie's body. So what's my argument exactly? What did God do? God put his breath in Adam. And that's what God continues to do till today. Your parents make you, and God puts his breath in you. His breath is your spirit and soul, perfect. But sadly, they have to live in a defective body. That is why the Bible says the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Matthew chapter 26. The spirit is strong, but it is encaged, encapsulated in a weak vessel. God didn't create that weakness. Let's stop throwing away our responsibility and running to God for what we should fix. Angelina Jolie lives in a place where people don't, oh my goodness, this is not my portion. They checked, they saw she had the defective gene, and they removed both mammary glands to ensure she'd be able to live. She didn't go to the mountain to pray and cast and bind like you do and end up with the foolishness you see around you. People sleeping on the streets waiting for a church to open, when 90% of the time, the solution is in their own hands. Why do I teach you this? I want to teach you this so that you can grab hold of your responsibilities and stop waiting on God for things that you can solve. Your parents chose one another. It could have been love. It could have been anything, whatever the situation is. Sometimes it's ignorance. Your father didn't know that AS and AS should not marry in their time, or your grandfather didn't know, and then they passed down the gene that is affecting you today from 3-4 generations prior. My mom is Romanian. They don't have malaria in Romania. So they don't know what genotype is. My mom came to Nigeria and they asked her at the hospital, what's your genotype? My mom said, what is genotype? She'd never heard of it before. They called Romania. No one in Romania knew what genotype was because they don't have sickle cell, because they're not dealing with malaria. Our parents' responsibility and our responsibility is to pass on the right genes to the next generation. But we never take that responsibility. And when we fail at taking that responsibility, we need to do what Angelina Jolie, for instance, did to protect the next generation from the gene defects the previous generation had. I was reading a story about a guy who went to check, who went to have a colonoscopy because so many members of his family had colon cancer. And he found the polyp and had the polyp removed. If you have cancer, if one of the things you fill in a form when you visit an oncologist is you have cancer in your family, and you're supposed to write it, because I've treated people who have cancer before, and we fill the form, and in the form is written, who, your father, did he have cancer, your grandfather? You're going to have to write that. So do you want to tell me that you're predisposed to cancer because your father or your grandfather had the gene, but then God made you predisposed to cancer? God didn't do such foolishness. Your parents did. Sometimes out of ignorance, sometimes out of being human beings, sometimes for whatever reason. And it shouldn't become a by sentence if you're able to understand it. The moment you're able to claim your responsibility and understand that you are what you are, not because God made you that way, but because nature and nurture made you that way. How does nature make you? Your father, your mother, the 500 people over the generations that had to come together to make you? And what about nurture? The environment you grew in, the pollutants, the chemicals, the herbicides, and the fertilizers used to grow the food that you've been eating. So you're a product of both your nature and your nurture. And that's not God's fault. That's human responsibility. God made everything perfect. And humans know how to make perfect things. That is why horse semen, that is the semen of a thoroughbred horse, is one of the most expensive fluids in the world, second only to horseshoe crab blood. Google this, don't trust me. Because over the years, thoroughbred horses are bred to be perfect. And that is why the semen of a thoroughbred horse is as expensive as gold. A thoroughbred racing pigeon, for instance, was sold the other day in China for about $3 million. It was bred to be perfect for speed and to be able to recognize its home from thousands of miles away. And every single time you want that pigeon to mate with another pigeon, you're going to pay in the hundreds of thousands. So if humans can do it with other animals, that is why you have Rottweilers. God did not create Rottweilers or Shih Tzu dogs. God didn't create Persian cats. Those are all human creations. As a matter of fact, God didn't even create the watermelon you have today, or the strawberries, or even the bananas you eat today. Those were made the way they are by human beings. What God created was the blueprint. Adam's the blueprint. If you see what a real banana looks like, it's about this small and it has big seeds. But the banana today was thoroughbred by humans. But when it comes to us, we leave the responsibility to God. Oh, I'm short because God made me like that. I'm a dwarf because God made me like that. Oh, I have a hunchback. God made me like that. If your God makes perfect things and a hunchback is supposed to be perfect, how come the army doesn't allow hunchbacks to recruit? Imagine yourself running around with a hunch. How far could you run? The army's not even going to take you if you have flat feet. So God did not make anything perfect. Sorry, God made everything perfect. But nature and nurture made you imperfect. So you have this imperfect body encapsulating a perfect spirit, a gift from God. Until you understand the limitations of your flesh, you can never harness the true abilities of your spirit. Because you give you're responsible to God. Oh, I'm like that. God made me like that. Shut up. Your parents made you the way you are. And the moment you understand your limitations and restrictions, the sooner you're able to overcome them. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Strengthen your flesh. It's not in God's hands. It is in your hands. God bless you as you awaken to your responsibility as a human being. I'm Daddy Freeze. See you soon.